I was sitting a few weeks ago in Newtown in front of the Starbucks with my coffee and reading my book. These two young guys walk up to me and they say they want to interview me about communism and the Cold War, that 50-year-long battle between the United States and the Soviet Union. They were high school sophomores and they had an assignment to speak with people who lived through that era. I agreed to the interview and I told them my grandson's a sophomore and we talk about that issue a lot. But I warned them, I have a radical point of view which they may not be ready to hear. But they said, no, we're seriously challenging what we learn in school. We want to hear what you have to say. I point to my book, The Edge of Anarchy by Jack Kelly. And I tell them that the book is about the Pullman strike, the largest labor strike in the history of the United States, led by the socialist Eugene Debs. It was in 1894 during a depression. Many workers and their families were near starvation. The strike essentially became a nationwide violent insurrection, even though Debs himself was nonviolent. I asked them if they learned about this in school. They said, we think our teacher might have mentioned something about it. The interview begins, and I tell them in my point of view, everything is completely the opposite of everything we're all taught in school. We are all taught that the communists were monsters who were trying to take over the world and brainwash everyone. When in fact, it is the Western powers, now led by the United States, that have been trying to take over the world for the last 500 years. For large corporate interests, they have been plundering the world's resources, exploiting the world's labor supply, and using extreme violence to do this. It is called imperialism, and the communists were trying to stop them. The reason why we believe the opposite is because said corporate interests own every single mainstream newspaper and TV station. And they completely dominate our education system using their economic power straight up through the university level. They give us a one-sided narrative which fools us into acting against our own self-interests and the self-interest of every human being on the planet. And they block dissident voices, such as mine, from speaking in the mainstream media. Sometimes I'm even blocked in Toastmasters. While I'm speaking, this guy walks past us and overhears what I'm saying. He starts screaming at me, "You dirty communist! If you don't love America, why don't you leave? Are you a Biden supporter?" I tell him I seriously dislike both Biden and Trump, but dissent is as American as apple pie. This country was founded by revolutionaries. Thomas Jefferson said, "What country can preserve its liberties if its leaders are not warned from time to time that their people preserve the spirit of resistance?" And there is actually nothing in the Constitution and no law that has ever been passed that requires me to love America in order to live here. And besides, this has nothing to do with whether or not I love America. It is about exposing crimes against humanity. The guy just kept cursing at me, but the young journalist said to him, "Sir, we're interviewing this gentleman. Why don't you come over here and give us your point of view?" The guy just goes like this and storms into the Starbucks. The interview concludes, and I ask the boys, what's their point of view? One guy tells me he is a libertarian. I tell him I have some common ground with the libertarians. We both are completely opposed to America's perpetual wars and the fact that our government steals our tax dollars in order to pay for these wars, which benefit only the war profiteers. The other guy said he's in the center and likes to listen to both sides. I tell him there's more than two sides. And when he's exploring those other sides, Make sure he learns about Gene Debs and the Pullman strike, because they're not going to teach him that in school. Then my friend comes out of the Starbucks and screams, "Try and get a cup of Starbucks in a communist country." I tell him I have toured communist China, and there is a Starbucks on almost every corner. You actually can't get a Starbucks here in Newtown. In case you didn't notice, the Starbucks here is closing in 5 minutes. It was 12 noon, because they don't have any workers to man the store. In communist China, they have plenty of workers because they treat them better. The guy just cursed me out again, got into his car, and drove away.